and record to the computer, and we're set to go. So as I said just a moment ago, before I started the recording, today is our second lecture, and I'm going to demonstrate and go over some of the basic properties of Adobe Photoshop. And in doing so, I'm going to do lesson 1 from the textbook. And some very basic things that are very frequently used and often applied to images. Even if they're good images, you're going to want to improve them and make them great. So to get you started again, we're going to go over to the left, and we're going to use some tools. And if you recall from the other day, when you select a tool in the options menu along the top, it gives you additional functionality. And then generally there's redundancy over to the right, looking at the properties panel. And we'll be using the adjustment panel as well. And we're going to be using a bunch of layers. This is the start file that we're looking at right now. And if I click on the tabs, because typically when you open files, it opens automatically in tabs. You can look at the final one. So this is what it looks like when we're done. This is what it looks like when we start. You can see that there is an improvement. There's been some additions and changes made to it. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that my rulers or my measurements are in inches, not in pixels or anything else. I want to make sure that when I go to the test desktop that I'm using, at least you for right now, are using essentials so that we have, we're on the same page. When you look at the panels, you're looking at what I'm looking at. So a couple of things before I start working on the image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change, I'm looking at the rulers up here, and if I hit Command R, they go away. And I had them up from earlier today. So if yours are not up, if you hit Command R, rulers become visible. And right now, because I was working on the web class this morning, they are in, the ruler is measured in pixels. So because we're typically working in print for this class, not always, I'm going to switch to inches. And to do that, you go up to the Photoshop menu and you look at preferences, and we're going to switch down here to units and rulers. And what I want to do in rulers is switch from pixels to inches. Okay, boom. And we can see that this image right off the bat, it's a little bit, easier to understand that the image that we're working with is almost 5 inches wide by 7 inches tall or high. But that's not all of it. The next thing that I always look at when I open up a file, even if it's something that a file that I've taken myself, is that I need to know the width and the height, but I also need to know the resolution of the image. So typically my go-to place is going up here to image size. And we can see that the image that they provided for us, now it's measured here in pixels, but I can switch to inches. There we go. As I said, it's almost 5 by 7. The resolution is 200 pixels per inch. And that's, for printing, is bare bones minimum. If I wanted to leave resample on and I wanted to create this image for the web, I would probably change it for 72 pixels per inch. If I were on a PC, maybe 96 pixels per inch. So that's where we're at with that. So I'm going to leave, I'm going to turn off resample because I like linking the resolution to the width and the height. And I also want to show you that if I decided later on, you know what, I would really like this image to be 300 pixels per inch, not 200. I can do that. And when you link the width to the height to the resolution, I can do that without any degradation in the quality of the image. But look at how much smaller the image is now. It's only 3 by 4 by 4.5. So it's shrunk quite a bit. So if I want to use the larger size, then I really need to just cancel or go back to 200 pixels per inch. That's what we're going to work on in this image. But that's something that I always look at first. I like having my rulers up at all times, just to give me an idea of size. And even when I'm zoomed in and I'm looking at it, because when I'm looking at this at 100% down here, that's 100%, that's a screen resolution, okay? Now, the next thing that I need to do is I want to look over here to the right to layers. You will be using layers a lot in this class, and I like having layers visible at all times. And one of the first things that I do, and this is not in the textbook, but this is one of the things that I do when I work on an image, is that I never work on the background layer or the base layer. Never, never, never. If I do, it's because I'm in a rush and I'm forgotten to do that. So what I want to do is I want to make a copy of this layer and then turn off the background layer or the base layer. To make a copy of it, you can do it one of two ways. I can click and drag onto the new layer button down here, and notice that it makes a copy of it. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to make a copy of that layer is to use the key command. And the key command with this layer selected is Command J. So that duplicates it. So now I'm working on a duplicate layer, and I can turn off the background layer for the time being. And if you want to save your file now as a working file, we can do that. And maybe that's what I'll do shortly. You'll also notice that they have a layer turned off here that when I turn it back on, here's that happy birthday ribbon that we're going to be using as a guide. But we're going to leave it turned off for the time being. The other thing that I want to do is that I want to be looking at, and you don't always have to do this, but it's kind of nice when we're working on a before and after file. I want to see the finished version so that I can compare mine with it, and to have to toggle back and forth is kind of a nuisance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Window, and I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to select 2 up vertical. And notice that now that I can see both of them, I can see the start file to the left, and I can see the finished file to the right. Yours might be reversed, but it really doesn't matter. I'm looking at both at the same time, and you can zoom in and you can edit them individually or together. It really makes no difference. Okay. So let's do that. Let's start with this file over here. And the first thing we want to do is we want to dress it up a little bit, because you'll notice that it's a little bit underexposed. It's not terribly bright. The colors are really intense, and the one to the right, we have good contrast from light to dark. So that means in order to edit this and to improve the image and to significantly make it look significantly better, is that I'm going to use an adjustment layer. Now, the book has us use brightness contrast. And as soon as I add that, I'm going to go ahead, and I should have had, there we go, I want it right above the rose copy layer. So if it's above or below, you can move it just by clicking and dragging it up and down. That's one way to move layers up and down, and that's very simple. There are a couple of other ways of doing that as well. But what I want to do is, the way I typically start off is I select the little, and I click the auto setting here. And you can see that there's a little bit of a lag here, but it brightens it considerably. And without doing anything else, it actually looks almost perfect. I mean, maybe that's really all I have to do to it. But what you can do is we can come back in and we can use these sliders if you want it more overexposed, or if you want it underexposed, you can do that. And that's the brightness. And if you want to add contrast, we can do that. And if you get lost, you can click on this button here to reset it. And then I can go back to auto settings again. And that brings me very close to what we have. It's not quite the same as the finished version, but it's very close. One thing that I should tell you, and I guess it's sort of to caution you about, is anytime you use an adjustment layer like this, it automatically affects all of the layers beneath it. And there is a way to target specific layers underneath, but we will get to that on a later date. But for right now, it's kind of a non-issue. But it will affect all the layers beneath it. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to show you other ways of brightening this. So I'll turn this one off. And then I'm going to go back to the adjustment layer. And this time I'm going to use levels. Levels is a slightly different way of making adjustments. And we can see this, the spikes in this diagram here that shows us that really the bulk of our, the range of tonality goes to midtones to the darks. So I can adjust this by hand. I can move the lights and everything with it down like so and brighten it up. Notice that I brighten it up a little bit more than the back flowers than theirs. And if I'm happy with that, then I can leave it. Or I can go back like I did before. I can reset it and I can select auto. And you can see that when I select auto, it really doesn't, with this one, doesn't take it far enough. But before it actually starts to clip, I'll move the highlights down to here. Maybe not quite as far. Yeah, it's not so bad. We can go here. And then maybe if I need to make the darks, the midtones a little bit darker, I can slide that way. So, and actually I like mine a little bit better than theirs right now. So that's a second way that you can adjust the range of tonality in your images right off the bat. It's a great tool, and it's used all the time, whether you're using a smartphone or you're using, you know, a really nice digital camera, or if you scan an image that's already been printed and you want to brighten it up a bit and make the colors a little bit more vibrant and add contrast between lights and dark. So that's a second way that we can add tonality or make adjustments. The third one that probably gives you the most control is this one right here. Okay, and this is using the curves. So I'll select curves. And again, you can see the same diagram here in the range of tonality. But I'm going to make my adjustments a little bit differently. I can select auto settings again, but like with levels, they have these 3 eyedroppers here that I did not use with levels, but I'm going to use it with the curves. So if I click on the top one, this is for the dark point. So what I want to do is I want to move over to my image and I want to find an area here that is the darkest dark in my image and click. So that could be right there. And notice that that's making those areas a little bit darker. But the next thing to brighten this up is I'm going to switch to the light areas and I want to go to the lightest light. And that's probably in one of the tips of the petals here. And that really brightens it up. And maybe that's a little bit too much. Okay. But maybe I need to come in here for a midtone and I need to click that. And whoa, that just really messes things up. And if that does, then I'm just going to undo and go back. Okay, so let's try that again. I'm going to come down here to the lights and I'm going to click in here. Let's find one of the lightest lights, maybe right in there. And let's find one of the darkest darks, that would be here. And that will darken that. And this looks a little bit brighter. The colors in the back are a little bit more intense. So it's slightly different than the final version, but I kind of like mine a little bit better. So those are 3 different ways. And you'll notice that if I turn the other ones on by accident, notice that it doubles and it triples the effect. Remember I said each of these layers have an effect on everything beneath them. So I'm going to turn these off and we'll leave the one here. If you want to leave the one with the brightness and darkness, you can. But again, that really needs to be adjusted a little bit. So I'll go back to the auto settings and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make it a little bit brighter here. Just to brighten it up just a little bit. Maybe that should be pretty good on maybe 95 or so. And I don't, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember what the textbook says. And when you're working on your own projects, you're not going to have a textbook to use to determine the exact settings anyway. You're going to have to go on your intuition or what visually looks correct to you. So that's where we start. And so now we've taken a mediocre image and we've made it look really nice. The other thing is to point out with these adjustment layers is that they are non-destructive. That when I turn it off, I can print it as is, or I can leave the image as is, and I have not ruined my original image. Okay? That's very important. In the past, before they had non-destructive adjustment layers, when you applied a filter like this, it would be a permanent change. And that's another important rule that I like to follow when I'm working in any of my programs, is I like to make sure that everything that I do is non-destructive, so I don't have to go back and start from scratch. That is, especially if you're under a deadline, or you don't want to have to repeat yourself and do things again, and that's really critical. So the next thing, what are we going to do next? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to build our own little ribbon down here. So to do that, I'm going to turn this ribbon on to give me an idea of size and placement, and I'm going to have this one here. But rather than follow the book and use and draw directly on this ribbon layer, I'm going to create my own layer. So I'm going to select the top curves layer that I created, and I'm going to create a brand new ribbon layer here. And to rename a layer, you just simply double click on the text, and I will name this one Ribbon 2. Okay. So that's the other thing that I like doing, is I like keeping elements in my work separate from one another. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to work on this Ribbons 2 layer. And to zoom in, I can hit Command plus, zoom in just a little bit, and move this over so I can see a little bit more clearly now. Now, what they want us to do is to use a selection. I'm going to use a selection tool, and I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool. So that's a good way of doing it. And I don't like looking at the little cursor here. So if I put the caps lock on, notice that I see the crosshairs. So now what I can do is I can click here, and it's like a rubber band. If I hold down the Shift key and I move over like so, I get the length that I need, and then I can click and I can move the cursor down like so, and try to find a middle range, and I click again, and I move over here. Try to use about the same angle and right the same location down here so that it's even. And I can click again, and I can hold down the Shift key to make sure that it's horizontal. I click again, and then I move over the starting point, and you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner of the cursor, there's a little circle. And when I click, that closes it, and I get what is called the marching ants. So the selection that I have, defined by these little marching ants, determines the area that will be affected. I need to fill this with a color now. The default foreground and background colors are black and white. To change the color of this, I can do this in a number of ways. I can change the color in the upper right-hand corner. I can also go to swatches, and I can change the color from here. Or I can click on the foreground color here, and I get the color picker. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to move over here, and it allows me to pick a color from anywhere. I want to pick a color right from here. Let's see if it will let me do it. And it's not letting me do that. That's weird. That's very weird. But what I can do is I can come up here to the top, and I can click from here. And notice that it lets me pick a color from within my drawing or my photograph. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to click OK. So if it's too dark, find something a little bit lighter. If it's too light, find something a little bit darker. So I'm going to find something that's close to what we have here. They have specific settings in the book, possibly. If you want to use hue, saturation, brightness, RGB, or CMYK, then you can. And I'm just eyeballing it for right now. If I'm close, I'm good with that. So I'll click OK. You'll notice that the foreground color has changed to that blue. And now I'm ready to fill this with the blue. I can do it one of two ways. I can hit Option Delete to fill with the foreground color. That's one way. Command Z to undo. I can also go under the gradient panel, and I can select the fill bucket. And the fill bucket will allow me to fill with a foreground color, and I can get the same thing. Typically, when I fill, I use Option Delete to fill with a foreground color. So now that the object is filled, I can hit Command D to deselect, and I can, if I need to, I can resize this and I can move it. So by using the Move tool, I can go ahead and I can move this up a little bit. okay, like so. And let's see if it's the right depth, and if it's not, I can hit Command T to transform, and I can move this down to make this a little bit wider, should I need to. And then I can hit return, and that finishes it. So I'm good to go. So that's one way of doing it. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to show you another way that I think is actually better. Because I get kind of intense about my own work, and I want to make sure that this is perfectly symmetrical and editable. And it's much harder to edit the pixels than it is an object created using the tool over here. And the tool that I'm going to use here is going to be a rectangle. So when I select a rectangle, and I'll leave the same color that's already been applied here, I want to make sure that it's a shape layer. And shape layers, when you do this, automatically create their own layer on top of this. So I'm going to come over here, and I'll leave it at this size here. And I'm going to click and drag like so, and then click across, and I'm going to make a rectangle, and it's filled. And you'll notice over here, it has made its own layer here. And this is vector-based or object-oriented, similar to what I showed you the first day of class. But now what I need to do is I need to make that little cut in here for the little wedge. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to use the pen tool. Not the pen tool itself, but I want to be able to add an anchor point, which is this one right here. I'm going to come over the center of this right here, and I'm going to click, and it's added an anchor point. Now I can use the direct selection tool, and I can take and I can move that anchor point over a little bit, like so. But notice that it's curved. I don't want it curved. I want it to be cut at a sharp angle. So to do that, what I need to do is I need to select the convert point tool and click on this anchor point, and it turns it to a corner point. Now, if I want, I can go back to the direct selection tool, and I can move this up or down or anywhere I want, and I can edit it, whereas I couldn't before doing it the way that the book tells us. So either way will work. I just like this way better. And if I want to enlarge it or reduce it or edit it in any way, shape, or form, I can do so. And when I'm done, I'm going to go back to the selection path, and I'm going to deselect, and I'm done. Now, as I said, I might need to redo this a little bit, so I'll hit Command T for transform. And again, maybe I'll make it a little bit wider. And I'm set to go. Hit return, and I'm done. And then click in the background to deselect. So now we've done the next step in here. We've made a little, another little ribbon that exists on its own layer, so I can turn it on and off. If I had it on the same layer as Happy Birthday, look at the problem I have. What if I wanted to turn it off or edit it? It would be much harder because they existed, they existed on the same layer. But being on the separate layers, they can function independently of one another. But when they print, they look like they're all on the same layer. The next thing that we're going to do for this lesson is we're going to work with some type here. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit, but in the book, it actually has us, when we use the type tool, we're going to put in the font, which is Minion Pro. It's going to be italic, and it's going to be 32 point. And we're going to pick this yellow color here. Where do you get the yellow color? Again, now that it's in the image that I've selected, I can click from within here and make sure that it's the same color as Happy Birthday. And I can click OK. Now I can come over to this start file, and I can click anywhere that I want. Make sure that I have the last rectangle that I created selected, so that when I click, it automatically creates its own type layer like it did the rectangle layer on top. And it starts by adding some Greeking to it to give you a sense of the size, and it gives you a sense of what it's going to look like with a font. And if I want to scroll through some of these others here, I can do that, or maybe it would be better. Let's go back here. And let's go to properties, and we have transform. I want to go to, let's look at the character panel. So I'll come down here, and if I click here, I get the same thing that I saw on the left, but when I start to go through here and I scroll across the fonts, notice how I can get a preview of what it's going to look like if I select a different font. Well, I want Myriad Pro. Okay, so I'll select it. I'm going to go back, but I'm going to type in here Elaine. Okay, I'm going to turn off caps lock, and I'll type in Elaine. And when I'm done, I can hit the return key. I can select the checkbox up here and up on the top, or I can just select the move tool. And now I can, with the move tool, I can select it and I can drag it where it needs to be. Should I need to move it while this layer is selected and the move tool is selected, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge it to the left, to the right, and I can move it up or down. And at any time, if you want to move an object vertically or horizontally, you hold, as you're moving it, hold down the shift key. And notice that it constrains the movement. Likewise, if I do that, notice that it's going to move it horizontally. And that can be very helpful with smart guides. So we're set to go. Now, really this ends the lesson, but I'm going to show you a couple more things just to kind of dress this up a little bit. If you look carefully at the happy birthday ribbon, you'll notice that what they have used here are a couple of things. You'll notice that the type looks like it's chiseled or inset into this ribbon. You'll also notice that the ribbon itself has a texture to it, like it's on construction paper. Well, what if I want to have this texture in my ribbon down here? I can do that very easily. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do next. But before I do, I want to make sure that I look at the number of participants that are available here. And I want to see from you, raise your hands or add question and answers or anything if you have any questions. No? None so far? Is everybody there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out down here. And just a little bit. Come on. Man, why? There we go. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the top ribbons and I'm going to make a copy of that layer, because I want to be able to grab just the texture from here. So I'm going to hit Command J. Then I'm going to take the copy and I'm going to put it directly above the text that says Elaine. And now I can take the move tool and I can move this over here like so. And now I need to clean this up, because what they have provided for us is text that has been rasterized. It's no longer editable. I like avoiding that unless it's something that I'm going to hand over to someone that I don't want them to edit. So what I'm going to do is I need to get rid of this text. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I can do it in 2 steps, but I think I'm going to try it in 1. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the rectangular marquee tool. And right here, I'm going to click and drag, make sure that that layer is selected. Nope, I don't want that one. I'm going to deselect. I want copy selected. Make sure that the right layer is selected. I'm going to click and drag. Make sure that all of this text is contained within the marching ants. And now what I want to do is I'm going to use a feature called Content Aware Fill. And to do Content Aware Fill, I can go to Edit, and I can select Content Aware Fill right here. And another little dialog box is going to pop up, and it's going to show me in green where it's going to apply the color. Now, if I look here, you can see that there's some areas here that it's taken. I can see the copy. If I move this like so, and it's not, let me zoom out a little bit. Actually, we'll do this like so. Notice how it's taking part of the text? I don't want that. So I need to take this text from happy and remove that. And I need to take the text from birthday and remove that. I don't want any of that in my selection. I only want to take from that background. And this should now, if you were looking over here in the right-hand corner, zoom out a little bit, you can see that it's removed the text and it's leaving the texture. That's what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what I should see here, let's go ahead and deselect. Yeah, let's turn that off. No, it didn't work. So let's turn that off. Let me do that again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, oh, you know what? I did it the wrong, let's do it here. I did it the wrong way. Here's another ribbons copy too. I did it, well, wait. Let's turn that one on. I'm going to throw this one away. Let me do it again. So let's do this again. I goofed. So I'm going to do this in 2 steps this time. I've done this in 2 steps before, but make sure that ribbons copy is selected. Select a rectangle, and I'm going to start with birthday first. And do it, just do it in 2 steps. Maybe I tried to bite off a little bit more than I could chew. Because I've had better luck on doing it 2 steps. Sometimes if you try to do too much too soon, it doesn't work that well. Okay, so I've got the wrong, I got to cancel. I got to make sure that I have the right layer selected, and I do. Nope, I have the wrong one selected. That's the one at the top. So I need to make sure that, let me go ahead and, yeah, I goofed. This one is the one that should be, this one should be ribbons. And this one should be ribbons copy. C-O-P-Y. Make sure that it's in the right location. So I'm taking the one that's below and I'm putting it here, and I want to make sure that this one is selected. So let's try that again. Make sure that I have the right selection, the right layer. And I go to Edit, and I go to Content Aware Fill, and let's see what we have. There we go. Now it's leaving happy, and it's removing birthday. That's exactly what I want. So I click OK. And you can see that now it's been removed. But you'll also notice that it's on that removal is on a separate layer. So what I want to do is I want to combine these 2 layers. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key or the Command key and select them both and hit Command E to merge those 2 layers together. And now I'm ready to remove happy. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and select just happy with this layer selected. And I go back up to Edit. And I select Content Aware Fill. Let's make sure that happy is gone now. There we go. It's gone. Perfect. I click OK. And like it did before, it put, if I deselect, it put that change on a separate layer. So I want to make sure that both layers are selected, and I hit Command E to merge them together. So now I have a shape here in the form of the ribbon that I had up here, but happy and birthday have been removed, and I'm left with just the texture. And it's done pretty seamlessly. It looks pretty believable. Now what I want to do is I want to move it on top of the type layer. I want to actually take the Move tool and take that texture and move it on top, like so. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to hold down the Option key, and I want to move the cursor between ribbons 2 and a lane. And notice how the cursor changes. And when it changes, I can click, and notice that it targets just the ribbon itself. But now notice that Elaine is invisible. And the reason that Elaine is invisible is because she was beneath that. So I need to do that again. I need to see, oh, wait. That's not what I wanted to do. Let me undo that again. I didn't want it there. Let me undo. I want ribbons 2 to be above the rectangle. That's what I wanted. There we go. Not above the text. I could do that, but not. I didn't want that. I want the copy of ribbons to be above the rectangle. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit the Option key and click again. And now you'll notice, there we go. The texture is contained within the word or within the shape that we created for the ribbons. And it's placed in there. And again, I can turn that off and I can leave it with that background color or turn it back on, or I can remove that. It's all non-destructive so that I can always take it back and make sure that it's already on its own separate layer, but it doesn't affect the one beneath it. One more thing that I want to do today, let's see where we are on time. I got plenty of time. What if I want to take the type and I want to add a bevel to this? Because if you zoom in on the text that they provided, you'll notice that there's an inside drop shadow here that makes it look like it's actually embossed in the text itself. Well, it could be outside or inside, either way. Well, that's what I'm going to do here with the text that we have. And that will be by using the effects little button down at the bottom of our layers panel. So I need to zoom out, make sure that Elaine, the text layer is selected, and then I'm going to select effects. And I'm going to go ahead and select bevel and emboss. And when I do so, I should probably zoom in a little bit on Elaine so I can see a little bit better. And now you can see that effect being applied. Now, do I want an inner bevel, which is what I have? Do I want an outer bevel? That would be another option. It's hard to tell for me looking at theirs. I kind of like the inner bevel there. And then I have a number, I can adjust the depth of this. You know, I can leave the default settings for right now. I can change the size. I can change, soften it or harden it. I like the default settings right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you'll notice that there's a bunch of other things that we can add here. We can add color overlays. We can add an outer glow. We can add drop shadows, all sorts of things. And as soon as I add that effect by using that down here, you'll notice that beneath the text layer, I see a little inset layer effect here. So I can turn off all effects, which means that I can add multiple effects to this layer, or I can just turn off the bevel. And if I had multiple effects, I could turn them off separately. So for example, on the ribbon copy itself, what if I wanted to, or let's go ahead and add to the rectangle rather. Let's go ahead and let's try this. The rectangle, I'm going to see what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and add a drop shadow and see if how that applies. And let's look at the angle here. I'm going to go like so. And let's adjust the opacity. Let's adjust the distance. There you go. So now notice that I'm adding a drop shadow here. And again, this would be an effect that I could apply. And it's easy to overuse some of these effects. And if I don't like it or want to edit it, you can always double click on the effect, or you can turn it off and boom, it leaves it undone. So what we have done here is giving you a basic idea of how things work. We use a lot of layers. We can use the adjustment layers to affect the quality of an image. I showed you how we can use a selection to create the ribbon, or we can use a shape layer as a different way of creating another layer to create the ribbon. We use text to create editable text that we could rasterize, but I don't recommend that we do. And it's kind of giving you a fundamental overview of what you do with really, basic photographs. And we'll get it into it a little bit more in depth next week when I do lesson 2. In the meantime, are there any questions from any of you? No? I'm going to go ahead up here and make sure that Roberto Bernal is selected and Christian Ortega. Christian Ortega. I guess, Christian, oh, that's Velasquez. There we go. I have Daniela. So you're from the other class, so that's right. I need to make sure that I do that. Christian Ortega Velasquez. The other section, I should say. I'm not used to saying that. So I'll put you in there. No questions from anybody? If you want, you can raise your hand and I can allow you to talk. Has everybody emailed me? Has everybody received an email from me inviting you to Google Drive? If you haven't, please do that this week so that when you finish up this lesson this weekend, you can take the original finished Photoshop file and just drag it into the folder that you've created into our shared Google Drive folder. Okay. That's about it for today, unless you have any questions. That's all I wanted to cover. It might be a little bit shorter than the one that I did yesterday. Yesterday, I had some issues. I've been having some issues with the monitor that I have behind my laptop. And I was using an older computer, and I don't know whether it was the computer or it was the internet speed, slowed down. So everything was a little bit, sluggish. Not like today. Today worked really beautifully in every respect of it, with a couple of glitches on my part that were easily correctable. So for next week, be prepared to work on lesson 2. If you don't have lesson 1 done, it's not the end of the world, but I would get it completed and try to stay up with me so that as I complete a lesson, you complete a lesson. So when we get ready to work on an assignment, and the first one will probably be the postcard assignment, and I want to make it optional, whether you want to work in black and white or color, and it will be a small image, maybe 4 by 5, 5 by 7. But then you'll have all the lessons completed and ready to go so you can focus on the postcard itself. And then as I'm doing new lessons, it will be less for you to catch up. Yeah? No? Are we good for today? Okay. So if we're done, then we're done for this week. Happy to see you guys here. And you're free to go. I'm gonna say goodbye for now. And I'm gonna go ahead and pause the video, and it will be posted shortly. And also if you are, favorites or like Canvas, I'm putting that in there too, a link to the video under the week that we're covering or the lesson, so that you can go to Canvas and click on the link directly and have access to this video. Okay? So if you want, go ahead and go, and I will stop sharing, and I will pause the video, and we're ready to go. So that's it. Bye-bye. No questions? No? No? I guess there aren't.